Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're taking a look at the world of mommy influencers.
Mm-hmm.
But with a bit of a twist.
Yeah.
We're talking about a case of pretty elaborate deception.
Yeah, this one is really something.
It is. It's both shocking.
It is shocking.
And honestly, it's kind of heartbreaking, too.
Yeah, absolutely. What I think is particularly jarring is how this influencer, she cultivated this image that really resonated, I think, very deeply with conservative values, the large family and the homeschooling and traditional gender roles, all of it just to be completely fabricated.
Right. And I think that's what makes this story so fascinating. So we're talking about the case of Patriarchy Hannah, right?
Yeah.
This influencer who claimed to be, what was it, a wife and mother to 14 children?
Yeah, 14 children. And her story is, I think, a stark reminder that these online personas can be very carefully crafted illusions.
Yeah.
And they're designed to exploit our trust and our deepest desires. And I think for a conservative audience especially, this case really hits a nerve. Because the values that she pretended to embody are things that, many in that audience hold dear: faith, family, traditional ways of life.
So she was really leaning into that conservative image?
Absolutely. Yeah, she presented herself as devoutly religious.
Like the perfect.
Yeah, the perfect conservative
mom.
Living in a town populated by like-minded families, sharing her beliefs.
Wow.
Yeah, and she went so far as to even claim that Jeff Durbin,
Oh, yeah.
a prominent pastor, had stayed at her home, which Durbin himself refuted.
Wait, hold on. So a whole town. And then inventing these visits from
Yeah.
well-known figures.
Yeah.
That's not even just embellishment. That's just straight up lying.
Straight up fabrication, yeah.
Wow.
And it gets even more elaborate.
Okay.
So she fabricated a husband, Tony, and even ran a fake Twitter account for him.
No way.
Yeah, creating this illusion of, a happy marriage, a supportive partner.
So it's like she built this whole alternate reality.
It is a whole alternate reality.
But how did she manage to pull this off for so long?
Well, she was meticulous. She was incredibly meticulous in crafting this facade.
Okay.
And going so far as to stage photos and, share these very carefully curated stories that, upon closer inspection, kind of unravel like a cheap sweater. But what's really unsettling is how she used this fabricated persona to build a community.
Right.
A community specifically on Discord.
So this wasn't just about likes and followers
No.
on Instagram. This was like a close-knit group of people.
Close-knit group of people who believed in her.
Oh, yeah.
And trusted her. And that's where I think the real damage lies. She wasn't just fooling strangers.
Right.
She was exploiting the trust of individuals who saw her as a role model, as a source of inspiration, and even as a friend. People were sending her gifts.
Oh, wow.
Confiding in her, and even making significant life choices based on her advice and example.
That's a serious breach of trust.
It is.
I mean, it's one thing to create a fake online persona.
Right.
But to use that to manipulate and exploit people on such a personal level is just,
Right.
It's just wrong.
It is, and it speaks to a deeper psychological pattern that we see in cases like this, and patterns that are consistent with narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay, let's dive into that for a second.
Yeah.
What are we talking about when we say narcissistic personality disorder?
So, narcissists have this pervasive need for admiration,
Okay.
a grandiose sense of self-importance, and a distinct lack of empathy. They often exploit others to kind of feed their ego and maintain this inflated sense of self.
So in Patriarchy Hannah's case, this need for admiration might explain why she created this elaborate facade of a perfect life, perfect family, the perfect, embodiment of conservative values.
Precisely. It's possible she was seeking validation and a sense of superiority by portraying herself as this, this exceptional woman who could effortlessly manage a large family, homeschool her children, and uphold these traditional ideals.
And it sounds like her followers, a lot of whom were probably looking for that same validation and sense of belonging, were, kind of easy targets for this manipulation.
They were, and it's a tragic situation, really, all around.
It is, but
how did this house of cards finally come crashing down?
So it's actually a fascinating tale of internet sleuthing.
Okay.
So inconsistencies in her online presence,
Okay.
particularly regarding a house that she claimed to have purchased, started raising some red flags.
So the cracks started to show in the carefully crafted narrative.
Exactly. And then this seemingly insignificant detail proved to be her undoing.
Okay.
A follower who had sent Patriarchy Hannah a gift
Okay.
received an Amazon receipt addressed to a Jennifer.
Hmm. This name, along with the shipping address, linked back to a series of locations associated with, you guessed it,
Oh, no.
Jennifer Bays, the woman behind the Patriarchy Hannah mask.
Wow, so like a digital paper trail.
A digital paper trail.
Led to her downfall.
It did. It was a key piece of the puzzle.
Wow.
The most damning evidence came when someone close to Patriarchy Hannah confronted her, demanding proof of her identity.
Okay.
So instead of providing genuine identification, she sent a photo, and the photo was stolen from another woman's Facebook profile.
So she was caught in a lie and then compounded it with another lie?
Right.
And like stole somebody else's identity?
Exactly. And it's a pattern we often see, I think, with individuals who engage in this level of deceit.
Yeah.
It speaks to this deeper psychological need to maintain the facade, even when confronted with undeniable evidence.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I mean, the jig was up, right?
The jig was up.
Everyone knew Patriarchy Hannah was a complete fabrication.
Yeah. I can only imagine, like, the sense of betrayal her followers must have felt.
Yeah.
To have somebody you trusted so deeply, who, like, seemingly embodied your values,
Right.
turn out to be a complete fraud.
Yeah.
That's got to be devastating.
It was, and it raises, I think, a lot of questions about the nature of trust and authenticity and the dangers of online persona, especially within communities that hold, certain values, like the conservative audience that she's so carefully targeted.
It's a reminder that we need to be cautious about who we trust online.
Absolutely.
Especially those who present themselves as, like, paragons of virtue or champions of a particular ideology.
Precisely. But before we delve deeper into kind of the fallout and the broader implications of this case, I think it's worth backing up and examining some specific examples of Patriarchy Hannah's manipulation.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty of her tactics. Because I think the more we understand how she operated, the better equipped we'll be to spot similar red flags in our own online interactions, right?
Right. One particularly insidious tactic that she employed was something called weaponized incompetence.
Weaponized incompetence.
Yeah.
That sounds
It's a mouthful.
intense.
It is. It is.
What exactly does that mean?
So it's a form of manipulation where someone pretends to be incapable of doing something in order to either, get out of doing it or to elicit sympathy and control.
Okay.
And in Patriarchy Hannah's case, she would constantly complain about her fictional husband, Tony, being lazy, incompetent, generally unhelpful around the house.
So she was playing the bad husband card, but the husband wasn't even real.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
She'd post these stories, even videos about Tony leaving dirty diapers around, forgetting important dates, just generally failing to meet her expectations.
And, I mean, I guess that might seem like harmless venting to some people.
Right.
But I could see how that could be incredibly manipulative.
It is.
Especially within a community that often upholds traditional gender roles.
Absolutely. You're right on the mark there, because it reinforces these harmful stereotypes about men and women's roles within a marriage. And it allowed her to position herself as kind of this martyr,
right?
This supermom figure who is single-handedly managing this large family and this supposedly incompetent husband.
It's almost like she was using this, like, fictional husband as a way to gain sympathy and admiration.
Yes.
To, like, further solidify her image as this, like, exceptional woman.
Exactly.
You could handle it all.
Precisely. And it's a tactic that can be, incredibly damaging in real-life relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Because it undermines genuine partnerships and reinforces this idea that men are just incapable of contributing equally to domestic life.
This case really highlights how these, like, seemingly harmless online personas can have real-world consequences.
Yeah.
Influencing people's beliefs.
Right.
And even their behavior within their own families and communities.
And it's a reminder, I think, that we need to be critical consumers of online content, especially when it comes to advice or portrayals of, family life. Just because someone presents themselves as an expert or a role model, it doesn't mean that their advice is healthy.
Right.
Or that their portrayal of reality is accurate.
Speaking of inaccurate portrayals of reality, didn't Patriarchy Hannah also fabricate stories about her children?
She did, and this is where I think her deceit takes an even darker turn.
Okay.
Remember, she cultivated this image of a perfect mother, effortlessly managing this large brood of happy, well-adjusted children.
Right.
But her content often revealed a very different and quite disturbing reality.
What do you mean?
Well, they're numerous instances where she describes, neglecting or even being emotionally abusive towards her fictional children.
Wow.
So, for example, there's this one video where she talks about her toddler son falling off a high chair
Oh, God.
while she was making pancakes. And instead of, showing concern, she laughs about it.
What?
And films his distress.
For her followers?
Followers.
That is just
appalling.
Appalling. Like, what kind of mother laughs at their child's pain, especially for an online audience?
It's a clear sign of a lack of empathy, potentially even, a twisted sense of humor.
Yeah.
But it's even more disturbing when you consider that she was fabricating these stories.
Right.
She was essentially using the idea of child abuse as a tool to elicit sympathy and manipulate her audience.
It's like she was weaponizing these, like, made-up children.
Yeah.
And using their, like, fictional suffering to further her own narcissistic needs.
That's a very insightful observation.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder, I think, that we need to be wary of these carefully crafted narratives that exploit our emotions, particularly those that play on our sympathies or our desire to help, those who appear to be struggling.
This is all so disturbing, especially for, like, a conservative audience that places such high value on family, faith, and, like, traditional motherhood.
It is, and it raises some, I think, important questions about why people were so drawn to her message.
Right.
Why they were so willing to believe her elaborate fabrications.
I imagine part of it has to do with, the desire for connection and belonging.
Yeah.
Especially in, a digital age,
Mm-hmm.
where it's easy to feel isolated and disconnected.
Right.
People are surfing for role models, for communities that share their values.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that makes them vulnerable to this kind of manipulation.
You've hit the nail on the head. And in Patriarchy Hannah's case, she specifically targeted an audience that was already predisposed to believe her narrative.
Right.
She tapped into their deepest desires and anxieties, offering this comforting vision of a world where traditional values reigned supreme and, large families were not only manageable, but idyllic.
It's a reminder that we need to be discerning about who we trust online.
Absolutely.
Especially those who claim to represent our values or cater to our specific beliefs.
Precisely. And we need to remember that, the internet is a curated space. It's a stage where people can present a very carefully constructed version of themselves.
Right.
And it's up to us as consumers of online content to look beyond the facade and critically evaluate the information that we're being presented with.
So how do we do that? How do we protect ourselves from these, like, online manipulators, especially those who are, like, skilled at exploiting our values and beliefs?
It starts with awareness. We need to recognize that anyone can create a compelling online persona, especially those who are skilled at understanding their audience and tapping into those desires and fears.
So it's about being, I guess, a little bit more skeptical, especially when something seems like too good to be true or perfectly aligned with our worldview. Because I guess sometimes the people who seem to embody our values the most are the ones that we need to be most cautious of.
Exactly. And beyond skepticism, we also need to cultivate those critical thinking skills. Don't just accept information at face value, especially online. Do your own research, verify sources, and look for inconsistencies, those red flags.
It's like being like an internet detective.
Yeah.
Looking for those subtle clues that might reveal, like, a fabricated narrative. Like in Patriarchy Hannah's case, it was those inconsistencies about the house purchase that was a clear sign that something wasn't adding up.
Precisely. And remember, it's okay to ask questions, to challenge authority, to seek out different perspectives. Don't be afraid to engage in healthy debate or to voice your concerns, even if it means going against the grain or questioning someone you previously admired.
It's about having the courage to, like, think for ourselves.
Yeah.
To form our own opinions based on evidence and critical analysis, not just, like, blindly following someone else's lead.
Exactly. And in the case of Patriarchy Hannah, those who were willing to dig deeper, to question her claims, to follow those digital breadcrumbs, they were the ones who ultimately exposed this web of deceit.
Yeah, and their actions not only protected others from being further manipulated, but also sent a powerful message that, deception and exploitation won't be tolerated, especially within a community that values honesty and integrity.
It was a powerful example of how individual actions can really make a difference, how speaking truth to power can have this ripple effect and inspire others to do the same.
It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to kind of hold each other accountable, especially in online spaces where it's so easy for, misinformation and manipulation to spread unchecked.
Absolutely. And that accountability can take many forms, from simply questioning a dubious claim to reporting harmful content or even publicly calling out those who are engaging in deceptive practices.
And it's important to remember that we're not alone in this fight. There are organizations and resources available to help us navigate these complexities of the digital world and combat online manipulation.
Right. Groups dedicated to media literacy, digital safety, combating misinformation are doing incredible work to empower individuals and communities with the knowledge and the skills that they need to protect themselves and to hold those in power accountable.
It's a reminder that even in the face of such disheartening cases, like Patriarchy Hannah's, there's hope.
Yeah.
There are people and organizations working tirelessly to promote a more honest, transparent, and ethical online environment.
And ultimately, it's up to each of us to contribute to that effort, to be mindful consumers of information, cultivate those critical thinking skills, and to stand up against deception and manipulation whenever we encounter it.
Well, this deep dive has certainly been a wild ride, filled with twists and turns and some pretty unsettling revelations. But it's also been incredibly insightful, reminding us of the importance of discernment, critical thinking, and holding each other accountable in a digital world that can often feel like the Wild West.
And I think for our, conservative audience in particular, this case serves as a powerful reminder to be cautious of those who claim to represent your values, to scrutinize their actions as closely as their words, and to remember that true integrity lies in honesty, authenticity, and a genuine commitment to the well-being of others.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought-provoking question. How can we, as individuals and as a community, work together to foster a more honest and trustworthy online environment, one where authenticity prevails and manipulation is swiftly exposed? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay vigilant.